I had a conventional family unit, 2 children, a supportive spouse, my own residence, and a reliable income. It seemed that I had little to worry about. However, I was soon to discover that this was a misperception. Despite the implausibility of the situation, I was able to identify a significant truth about infidelity. With regard to the situation in the southern United States, it is evident that there is a lack of comprehension regarding the distinction between a tornado and a divorce. In any case, it is inevitable that one party will suffer the consequences of a divorce. Robin Williams's academic background encompasses forensic science and a PhD in molecular biology. My own career commenced with laboratory research conducted for the FBI, after which I became a pathologist at a well-known hospital. I had been employed at a well-known hospital for several years, but I was disillusioned with the corporate hierarchies that I encountered there. Therefore, I made the decision to enter the world of entrepreneurship at the age of 40. I launched my own company, RHT Labs, which specializes in DNA analysis. The company is short for Robert Henry Thomas. I provide court-approved DNA testing services to government bodies, corporations, legal practitioners, and individuals. My scientific bent was acquired from my mother, but my economic ability came from my father. While he was not exceedingly wealthy, he was able to provide me with the resources I needed to establish 3 laboratories in a big Midwestern city. I am thriving. My wife, Melissa, who is also known as Liz, was my undergraduate sweetheart. We met in the midst of our sophomore year, and we soon became exclusive. She majored in biology and secondary education. 6 months after graduation, we married during the break around the end of my first semester of graduate school. We were profoundly in love, and we were able to survive on a diet of ramen. During our sophomore year, we became exclusive partners. She majored in biology and secondary education. 6 months after graduation, we married during the break, around the end of my first semester of graduate school. Liz worked as a teacher at the local high school. We were profoundly in love, surviving on a diet of ramen. We began our married life with a positive outlook, welcoming our first child, Tracy Lynn, 4 years later. Hank, as we affectionately called him, joined our family 2 years after that. While Liz was engaged in the joys of parenthood, she continued to work as a substitute teacher in our school district. She eventually returned to teaching full-time. At the time, Tracy was in the 3rd grade and Hank was in the 1st grade. By the time they were 12 and 10, I had moved to private practice. The first year was challenging due to long hours and personnel turnover. However, I eventually assembled an ideal team that shared my work ethic and valued fair wages and benefits. They rapidly discovered that they were working for an owner who had high requirements. Now, at 47, my life is centered on marriage, children, employment, and our lake property. We purchased the lake house approximately 10 years ago. It required extensive renovations, but we purchased it at a reasonable price and enjoyed it. Together, Liz and I undertook the task of renovating the property. During the summer months, Liz and her children resided there for the majority of the time, while I reduced my working week to 4 days in June, July, and August. This allowed me to spend long weekends with our loved ones. Our marriage has experienced both positive and negative periods. The positive periods have been more prevalent. We occasionally experience disagreements, as is common in any regular marriage. However, we are both willing to admit when we are wrong and reconcile. We both loathe being at odds with one another, so we quickly own our flaws. While our marriage is not perfect, I would not alter it for anything. Recently, Tracy had commenced her 2nd year of college, indicating that Hank would shortly follow suit in the autumn. We were all anticipating our summer retreat at the lake house, cognizant that our time together as a family of 4 was rapidly diminishing. Tracy had a romantic partner, and while Liz and I did not believe he was an optimal choice, she was confident that we would meet someone exceptional in due course. We were enthusiastic about the prospect of our family expanding, yet we held a deep appreciation for the time we still had with our intimate group as late spring drew near. Liz had dedicated the previous 2 weekends to preparing the lake house for the forthcoming season, a routine since purchasing the property. She had maintained a certain level of privacy, which allowed her to make the cottage her own. Additionally, she had a few evenings to unwind, read, and drink wine, which provided her with a much-needed respite from her husband and children. Meanwhile, the rest of us at home had our own rituals, such as attending early-season baseball games in St. Louis and Chicago. Liz had returned from what she called prep and scrub weekends, a term she used to describe her activities over a few Sunday evenings. By the second Sunday, she seemed to be in a somewhat altered state of mind. My wife was obviously not herself by the second Sunday, and by the third, she was in the same attitude. I inquired about her well-being. Given that she had previously been quite cordial, I was taken aback when she abruptly ended the conversation and left the room. I was perplexed by her behavior and decided to give her some space for a few hours. Later that night, she apologized for her actions as we went to bed. I apologized to Liz for being harsh earlier and asked her to excuse me for being unpleasant. I told her that I was sorry if I had upset her and explained that I had only been concerned because she seemed a bit strange. Liz said that she was fine and avoided eye contact with me. I believe I am simply fatigued from exerting myself at the lake. Everything is fine, my dear. Would you like a back scratch? That would be ideal. Liz is particularly fond of having her back scratched. After a few moments of casually stroking her back, my hands began to explore. We remain physically affectionate and vibrant. On occasion, our children find us giggling and holding hands over breakfast. Tracy playfully admonishes us with the acronym TMI or attempts to get a Hank typically blushes and giggles when she returns from the water. However, tonight, when I attempted to initiate physical contact, she did not even turn over. Instead, she sighed deeply and stated, "Thank you for the back rub, but not tonight." I was not taken aback, as I have been turned down many times, just like any other husband. However, given our recent busy schedule, it had been more than a week, which surprised me. It became apparent that tornadoes, which are analogous to earthquakes in California and hurricanes on the East Coast, are a constant threat in the Midwestern United States. People in our area are well aware of tornadoes and their catastrophic potential, particularly in the spring. This year, it was our turn to experience a tornado. A Category 3 tornado has winds of up to 165 miles per hour, whereas Category 5 tornadoes Class 3 tornadoes can reach speeds of over 200 miles per hour. On Monday night, just as Liz returned from her second cleanup excursion, a Class 3 storm slammed a mile from our home. I promptly called our lakeside neighbors, Eric and Bev Parson, who lived only about 100 yards away. They were retired and spent the entire year on the lake. Eric picked up on the second ringtone, indicating that a significant storm had passed. "Are you and Bev okay?" he asked. "Is there anything I can do to be of assistance?" "We are unharmed, Henry. Thank you for inquiring. Our vicinity has not sustained any significant damage. I promptly inspected your location and observed that there are a few damaged windows and a considerable amount of debris scattered around, but nothing that cannot be managed. The precipitation has ceased, so I will secure your windows in the morning. There is no need for you to hurry down here tonight." "Thank you, Eric. I am relieved to hear that you and Bev are both safe. I will be there first thing in the morning. On the following morning, I will bring you a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts as a gesture of my gratitude. Henry, you are under no obligation to spend your money on this gift. Bev will undoubtedly discover them and have me dispose of them. She is particularly sensitive to the presence of unhealthy food, so I am considering bringing a couple of donuts with me and keeping them at my apartment. I will contact you when I arrive if I require assistance." The workplace that I would not be present for a few days. In actuality, they probably accomplished more during my absence. Shelby, my assistant, expressed concern about how they would function without me, but assured me that they would make do. Liz volunteered to take time off to assist me, but when I explained that the damage was minor, she decided to stay at home and work in. We were also concerned that leaving an 18-year-old a year, it was thought that an 18-year-old high school senior could potentially experience difficulties if left alone for an extended period. I proceeded to the lake and spent the following days engaged in cleaning in preparation for the installation of 3 new windows. Eric offered assistance, and I reciprocated by providing food in the form of Krispy Kreme donuts. By Wednesday afternoon, the majority of the significant cleanup had been completed. Liz had placed prior to my departure on Sunday. I had placed the garbage can near the mailbox in anticipation of its pickup on Tuesday. However, due to the storm, the contents of the bin were dispersed throughout the yard, and the bin itself was blown down the street. After recovering it, I initiated the final process of filling the bin with debris that had flown across the grass. I was nearly finished with this task when I observed what appeared to be a zip. An item was observed at the other end of the yard, initially identified as a transparent plastic bag containing abandoned clothing. Upon closer examination, however, the contents were found to be disturbing: a bathing suit, blouse and panties. The bag emitted a complex olfactory profile, including the distinctive sense of human sweat and other bodily secretions that lingered for at least 3 days. Given the subject's background and DNA analysis, the odor was identified as having a peculiar familiarity, evoking memories of. After inspecting the blouse, it was evident that 4 of the 6 buttons were missing. There were also white blotches on both the swimsuit and the panties. I experienced a visceral reaction as I attempted to suppress the urge to vomit. However, despite my best efforts, I was unsuccessful. How could this have occurred? Liz and I had not visited the lake since Thanksgiving weekend. Even then, it was a family gathering with no indication of intimacy. I rapidly discerned that these items could not have been in the bag for more than a few days. Suddenly, I was overcome with a sense of unease. The marriage, which had been built on love and dedication for approximately 1 year, was severely rocked. I brought my new items outside to our terrace, sat down, and forced myself to think. It was unlikely that Lisa would have anticipated my absence by the lake until Tuesday morning, when the garbage was collected. There was no need to conceal anything because it would be disposed of long before my return. This was the first spring visit, but our house was situated at a sufficient distance from Parsons to allow for discreet comings and goings. I also recall sensing something was amiss with Liz when she returned after both weekends. Was it because she had been with him? How long had she been faithful? Was it a local infection? Had they simply met here? Was it a disease? I was concerned that I might have contracted an STD. My head was spinning, and I was experiencing difficulty breathing. I attempted to remain calm, but it was challenging. I was not in a position to return home after an hour. I reached out to Liz to clarify that there were still tasks to complete and that I had already consumed several beers. It seemed prudent to remain at the lake house for the night and return to town early the next morning. The lake house was only an hour away, so I could wake up at 6. I would be able to return to work at 8 a.m. I am gratified to find that the damage is not significant. Liz stated that she wished I were returning home that evening. I wished to make amends for my lack of enthusiasm on Sunday. I apologized to Liz for my lack of excitement on Sunday. I regret, Liz, but I will see you at some point tomorrow. Goodbye, sweetheart. I love you. Good night, Liz. I was unable to express my love for her after consuming a few bourbons. I fell into a restless slumber until 5 a.m. While driving home, I made a few judgments and calls. First, I intended to handle the DNA lab work myself, so I went straight there to start the process before others arrived. Second, I contacted my lawyer, Tom Kincaid, and informed him of the circumstances. Finally, I contacted a former FBI colleague who now works in the private sector to explain what assistance I needed. By the end of the day, I had completed 2 out of 3 chores. Tom and I talked over lunch and decided that regardless of the circumstances, she would receive half of our assets in a divorce, even if the children chose to stay. I considered that, in this system, it was not unreasonable to conclude that her financial condition would remain somewhat unaffected. It seemed to me that one could breach one's vows and still earn financially. In addition, my acquaintance had arranged for the installation of cutting-edge undetectable surveillance technology at the lake cottage. I needed evidence of her infidelity, even if it would not change the outcome of the divorce. I was reluctant to allow her to portray herself as the victim to our friends and relatives. If necessary, I would share everything on social media. Liz May would recover monetarily, but her reputation within our marriage would suffer. The third project involved the DNA identification procedure. It was relatively straightforward to ascertain Liz's findings, but identifying an unknown person required a more time-consuming process. If circumstances were favorable, I might complete it by the end of the day. Upon returning home, I greeted the children and gave Liz a brief kiss on the cheek. They were eager to learn about my activities over the previous 24 hours. I recounted the story to them while they gathered around to view the photographs on my phone. Despite her deceit, Liz seemed concerned about the fate of our second home. We had spent a considerable amount of time together, and we all shared fond memories of it. I spoke in a calm and measured tone, attempting to maintain a sense of composure. As Liz leaned in to view my phone, her perfume invaded my olfactory senses. Typically, such an occurrence would provoke a reaction, yet tonight it merely induced a sense of despondency. With deliberate intent, I captured an image of the detritus in the yard and, before sharing it with them, I altered the image to make the Ziploc bag appear slightly larger. Even in my grief, I recognized the necessity of employing psychological strategies. I observed that the image captured a considerable amount of waste, which was subsequently cleaned and bagged. I lingered on this image for a moment, noticing Liz's initial tension, which later dissipated during our interaction later that evening. As I was getting into bed, Liz reached out to me. I could sense my stress levels rising as she placed her arm around me and cuddled up next to me. "Are you all right, Henry? What is the problem, sweetheart?" I typically turn to face her and engage in a close conversation, but tonight I just lay down facing away, feeling utterly exhausted. I have been untruthful. I spent the day at Lake House, followed by an evening of overindulgence. I then had to rise early and endure a lengthy day. I am grateful to you, Henry, for bearing the brunt of these tasks. I realize it was a considerable undertaking, and I should have probably accompanied you. However, I believe you should go down next, Liz. I suggest that we wait a week after school ends on Monday to double-check that the windows were properly installed and that everything meets your standards. I believe we would all feel better knowing you are looking out for our family's best interests. I was thinking exactly the same thing. I will go down after school. Our final day is a half day, so I might be back by Tuesday night. There is no rush. Dear husband. At this juncture, I feel compelled to state with a reasonable degree of certainty that I have never declined intimacy with Liz. She has consistently been the epitome of beauty to me, encompassing not only her physical appearance but also her intellect and personality. However, tonight was a notable exception. I found myself struggling to resist the urge to embrace her. To conceal my emotional distress, I apologized to Liz. I was utterly drained. Her gentle touch ceased, and she let out a faint cry. Naturally, Henry, you require a good night's rest. I love you, too, I responded deliberately, omitting the word love in the hope that it would go unnoticed as I lay in the darkness. I came to the realization that my marriage was likely over. Despite my inability to suppress my feelings for Liz, I was unable to trust her again. It was evident that she had identified a deficiency in our relationship and sought solace elsewhere. She had deceived me and betrayed my family by leaving without informing me. From this point on, I would be preoccupied with her whereabouts and the potential implications of her actions. The house, I would be preoccupied with where she was going and who she was meeting. The idea of her spending 4 days a week at the lake house without me was unacceptable. The identity of the individual in question was unknown, but it was evident that he had been at our lake house with my wife, possibly in our marital bed. I will not tolerate such disrespect at 4. The time was 30 a.m. On Monday morning, I attempted to sleep, but Liz was already awake and had begun her day. I showered, dressed, and left for the office, a rare occurrence on a Saturday, but not entirely unprecedented. At approximately 7 a.m., she called. I chose to let the voicemail go unanswered, a departure from my usual behavior. She responded with a text message, expressing hope that I had slept well and that I would feel better soon. She also included a love message. I did not respond for an hour, finally sending an apology for being swamped with an urgent last-minute order. I added a heart emoji, as I felt this was the best gesture I could make, despite the fact that it was the weekend. I called Tom at 9, I requested that he begin drafting the divorce papers. While our state recognized adultery as a basis for divorce, its legal significance was limited. I declined to cite irreconcilable differences, a common trope in such cases. I instructed him to have everything ready by the following week at 3 p.m. On Monday morning, I discovered the name Kenneth Glenn Lester, which I recognized as significant but could not recall the context until a quick Google search revealed it. Les had spent the previous 3 years as the Lakes clubhouse manager during his early 30s. He had served a brief prison sentence for burglary. Eric had introduced me to him, presenting him as a decent young man who had made mistakes in his youth but was now taking advantage of. During our club dinners, Les consistently demonstrated courtesy. Based on my observations of our limited interactions, he handled matters effectively and maintained a friendly demeanor towards everyone. When problems arose, Les was prompt in addressing them. He appeared to work diligently and intelligently, as far as I could ascertain. Interestingly, he had a notable impact on my wife, who eventually became involved with him despite the 12-year age difference. The age difference between the two parties may have contributed to the increased confidence of the younger woman. The following days were met with uncertainty until Liz proceeded to the lake. Sadness was replaced by anger, and concerns arose about maintaining composure with her. Fortunately, Hank had scheduled several high school baseball games for the weekend, which I could attend in the late afternoon. It was likely that Liz would attend one or both of them, as being together in public would be more straightforward than confronting the situation. In the absence of my wife, I could work an additional hour or two in the garden each day without arousing suspicion. If she inquired about my whereabouts, I could always claim that I was engaged in additional chores. This would prevent a backlog of tasks when we relocated to the lake house in a few weeks. However, maintaining a physical distance from my unfaithful wife would be challenging. Nevertheless, I was determined not to engage in any intimate contact with her, regardless of the time that had passed. The following days were marked by a certain degree of difficulty. Liz continued to attempt to rectify the situation, yet my justifications appeared inadequate. By Sunday night, her displeasure had transformed into anger. I sincerely hope that you will be able to overcome this by the time I return from the lake house. She verbally attacked me before rearranging all the bed covers to her side of the bed. On Monday, I departed early without bidding farewell. Hank sent me a text message while he was on his way to school. Despite the challenges, she will be fine. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. I sat down at my phone and began to weep. How did life become so chaotic so quickly after lunch? Liz texted, "Thank you for the heartfelt farewell. You are acting like such a jerk right now. Be careful on the road. I will see you soon. Don't forget to check. It is of the utmost importance that everything aligns with your preferences." She responded later that evening while Hank was with friends. I accessed the live broadcast from the lake house, which was provided by my FBI contact and colleague. Here they are, my esteemed wife and her partner, whom I have designated as Lester the Molester. They were situated in a side-by-side position. Her head was resting on his shoulder, and he was stroking her hair. "Do you think Les suspects anything?" "I doubt it, babe. It has only occurred 8 times since last Thanksgiving. We were very careful. I can't imagine how we would find out about it. You and I are far more intelligent than him. It is likely that this assumption is correct, but he has been acting in a peculiar manner since his return last Thursday from the hurricane. He rejected me on 3 occasions and subsequently allowed me to make amends for the lack of attention." Lester smiled, massaging her and placing his hand on her shoulder. "Lester, I value the time we spend together, but I also adore my spouse and our family. I do not wish to lose either of them. To lose either of them, we both recognize that this is merely an affair. It is not love, and it never will be. As far as I am aware, you are probably engaged in relationships with 2 or 3 other wives. You are correct, Liz. I do not desire a more profound connection than what I currently have with you. However, I do have strong feelings for you, and I do not want you to experience distress. On a different note, if it is not an imposition, I am curious, am I the first person you have engaged in an extramarital relationship with? The individual with whom you have engaged in sexual intercourse outside of the bounds of matrimony? I am not passing judgment, I am merely curious." Liz remained silent for a period of time, and I mentally responded with a stunned, "Wow. It could not have been worse. I can't imagine this. I wonder if there is a way to reconcile this with the other occurrence that took place approximately 5 years ago. That incident involved our district's administrator, who was quite handsome. I am uncertain as to the specifics. I was overcome with a sudden urge to engage in sexual intercourse with him. He was attentive to my needs and I did not object. We proceeded to date for approximately 6 months until I came to my senses. I had observed him with another woman, which caused me great distress because he had always asserted that I was the only woman for him. I struck him with such force that I believe he experienced visual impairment for several days. I believe his name was Mike Jensen. The individual in question was consistently arrogant in my presence. I have now come to understand why he engaged in sexual intercourse with my unfaithful spouse. It was a disturbing revelation. I advise you to recall this information at your earliest convenience. Liz, I am currently involved with both Julie Mitchell and Kim Ferguson. I am aware that this information is inconsequential, as we are merely engaging in recreational sexual activity. However, I believe it is important for you to be aware that we are all susceptible to sexually transmitted diseases. The individual in question stated that he takes precautions and gets checked out on a regular basis. This is encouraging to hear. I was surprised to learn that Julie was aware of this, given her seemingly naive appearance. As we both recognize that this is just for fun, and given that I feel like my boyfriend has ignored me all week, I suggest that we engage in sexual intercourse and provide me with the attention I desire. I observed the proceedings for approximately 10 minutes, which proved to be a longer duration than initially anticipated. I had anticipated that the process would conclude within a minute. The couple swiftly removed their outer garments and proceeded to the bed. My wife was already relaxed and engaged in the act. She implored her partner, "Please, let's do it here. It's quite comfortable." I turned off the camera, proceeded to the restroom, and reflected on the situation. I sent a text message to Tracy. On Tuesday, I informed my children that Hank and I needed to speak with their mother at noon. I told them about the unfortunate reality of their mother's behavior. I was sad, and tears flowed freely. They also shed tears, but in the end, they stated their readiness to understand and offer support. I told them that if their mother wanted to confess to me on Wednesday evening, they should be prepared to listen. It is possible that she may do so, and there is a slim chance of reconciliation. However, it would be inadvisable for them to reveal any information they may have. Tracy requested that Hank join us for the remainder of the week, as he was on vacation from school and she was taking classes at the start of the summer before returning home. I found her admirable for her care of her younger brother, despite her sadness. Liz arrived at approximately 4 o'clock. At 4 p.m., I awaited her in my office. I was seated in my leather armchair, sipping a glass of Four Roses, a single-barrel bourbon, when she entered the room, placed her purse on the table, and sat on my lap. I surmised that her recent encounter with Lester, the molester, had left her elated. Given the circumstances, I was in a relatively good mood, as a result of my cuckolded spouse. I raised my hand to hold her at a distance. She noticed the serious expression on my face. "What is the problem, Henry?" I motioned towards the couch. "Please take a seat. The children are unharmed. There is no cause for concern, Liz. I could see the relief in your eyes when you heard the news. However, the situation may become more challenging from here on out. Liz, I am offering you one opportunity to share your thoughts. Is there anything you would like to discuss? I am requesting that you provide me with complete honesty in return for my promise to be entirely honest with you. Please take as much time as you require before responding. Henry, what would you like me to say? The lake house is a lovely location, and the children are all well. Until a few days ago, we had not disagreed for several months. Our intimacy has been satisfactory. Is there anything else you would like me to say? Do you wish me to convey that my expectations of achieving a resolution were rapidly diminishing? Throughout our marriage, I have consistently maintained transparency and sincerity. I have never resorted to deceit, misrepresentation, or falsehoods. I am not without flaws, I am, in fact, quite imperfect. However, I have always placed a premium on honesty in our relationship. Henry, I am seeking to gain a deeper understanding of your perspective. Is there anything you have not yet disclosed that could potentially lead to the dissolution of our marriage? I am at a loss as to what you are seeking or referring to. Tears welled in my eyes as I experienced a profound sense of heartbreak. I am deeply saddened to learn that you hold me and our marriage in such low regard. I am unable to comprehend what I have done to warrant your betrayal and disloyalty. I had assumed that we were connected in a relationship that would last until death, but I have since realized that this is not and will never be the case. I am aware of your relationships with Ken Lester and Mike Jensen. Liz's complexion went paler instantly, her mouth hung open, and one hand covered it. Absolutely not. She spoke in a barely audible voice, pleading louder. No, Henry. Let me explain. God, what did I do? Please, Henry. They signify nothing. Nothing. I only adore you, really. You said Michael Jackson was damn attractive, if I recall correctly. On Friday night, you informed Lester, the molester, that your husband was unable to satisfy your sexual needs, and you sought to regain your strength and femininity. These statements are not insignificant to me. How did you discover this information? It is relatively simple. My wife was unfaithful last week. I set up surveillance equipment after discovering evidence of your infidelity. The items in question, a bikini and panties, were discovered in a zip-top bag that had been blown out of a trash can during a storm. Also found inside the bag was your destroyed blouse. However, you may easily replace it with another item, allowing Lester to remove his own clothing while you engage in sexual intercourse. The DNA analysis was simple for obvious reasons. Therefore, you were spying on me and Lester. Liz, the entire incident was recorded, but I ceased observation immediately upon recognizing the repulsiveness of the act. As soon as you initiated this process, I turned off the television, proceeded to the restroom, and vomited. Liz was in a state of distress, unwilling to meet my gaze. I did not attempt to console her and did not continue to inform her of her infidelity. Instead, I maintained silence. My heart was overwhelmed with anguish. After a brief interval, she began to compose herself. What recourse might I pursue, Henry? How might I rectify this predicament? I implore you to reassure me that we can salvage this situation. I am unable to envisage a life without you, our home, and our shared planet. Henry, I beseech you to confirm that there is a way out. There is a solution to this chaos, Liz. However, it does not include us being together. You have violated my trust, my affection, and my devotion to you. You have blatantly ignored them. I held you, Liz, and you trampled on my affection. You mocked me as a man and a husband. Did you really think I would allow my wife to be with other men, or that your opinion of me? I am saddened by your decision, Liz, but I have made mine. The only way forward is to separate. It is imperative that we present a unified front for the sake of our children, our business, and my teaching career. We can overcome this obstacle. I am willing to seek professional help and counseling. We are resilient, Henry. We can weather this storm. Liz, I must be frank. I am divorcing you due to your infidelity. You have the option of discarding those documents. But if you do, I will have my attorney prepare another set and send them to you at work in front of your children and colleagues. I implore you to spare Hank from that. Whatever feelings you may have for me, please consider your son, Henry. Your feelings for me are too strong for you to do that, and I am unable to bring myself to end our 24-year marriage. Given that you have been married for 1 year, it is imperative that you collaborate to identify a solution that will salvage your marriage and family. It is evident that you lack an understanding of the true essence of love. You have erroneously equated comfort and security with commitment. Love is not merely a sentiment, it is manifested in actions. Genuine love entails fidelity, self-sacrifice, and the prioritization of one's partner's well-being. Liz, I would like you to consider how you felt about Tracy and Hank while you were having affairs. I would also like you to think about how serious you were about preserving our marriage while pursuing other men for purely physical reasons. Your actions indicate that you are a selfish and deceptive person. I will argue this with Henry. I will fight tooth and nail against this divorce. I refuse to give up on us. I was growing tired of her moral superiority. I experienced a surge of superiority and rage. Liz, you are truly testing my patience. If you wish to engage in debate, I am prepared to do so. However, before we proceed, I suggest that you speak with the children and elucidate the circumstances. Attempt to persuade them that you retain affection for me and our family. Are you aware of Hank's whereabouts? Presumably, he is at school with Tracy. I am profoundly distressed because our family is disintegrating. What did you say to our children, Henry? I spoke at length. Liz, I merely stated the facts. I informed them that you had engaged in 2 extramarital relationships, one that began 5 years ago and another that is still ongoing. In contrast to you, I was transparent with them. I did not urge them to harbor negative sentiments towards you or sever ties with you. I suggested that if you returned home and confessed sincerely, there might be a possibility of salvaging our marriage. However, today, Liz, you have revealed your genuine priorities. You prioritize your own interests above all else. Henry, I hope we can part ways amicably without making a spectacle of it. I would prefer to leave you with nothing, but I recognize that is unlikely in the context of the courts. However, I am pursuing legal action against both the school district and the Lakeside Club. While I recognize that this may not lead to a resolution, I believe it is important to hold those responsible for the breakdown of our marriage accountable. While you were the primary perpetrator, others also played a role in the demise of our marriage. They were accomplices, and I believe they should face the consequences of their actions. The financial consequences of your actions are likely to be more favorable in the short term. The custody agreement is essentially irrelevant given that Hank will be attending college before any resolution can be reached. I am not leaving, regardless of your decision. You are free to occupy the master bedroom, or you may choose to relocate to the spare room or to live with Lester, who has a history of inappropriate behavior. If you choose to portray yourself as the victim in this situation, I will be forced to share the audio and video recordings from the past 2 days have been obtained from a multitude of sources, beginning with your parents and extending to your siblings, friends, colleagues, and even your Wednesday pickleball league. It is evident that I am not the antagonist in this situation. I did not betray trust or violate the sanctity of my marriage, and I will not attempt to conceal your reaction from her face. It was apparent that she was finally comprehending the gravity of her actions, as evidenced by the visible signs of immense distress on her face. I extend my sincerest apologies, Henry. I recognize that my actions have caused you significant distress. However, I kindly request your understanding for a moment. I am experiencing a sense of detachment. I rose from my seat and began to move across the room, but then paused. I am sorry, Liz, but I will never embrace you again. Liz struggled for some time, but ultimately, it became necessary for the divorce to be evenly shared. Henry's lawyer, Tom, was proven correct. It seemed that a departure from the marital bond may be viewed favorably by the courts, while the aggrieved party is subjected to penalties. Fortunately, as Henry's offspring were adults, there was no obligation for child support. His enterprise was thriving, and despite the settlement, he would remain financially secure. Liz sought to maintain their joint ownership of the lake house, but Henry opposed this. Eventually, they consented to establish a trust for Tracy and Hank, with each receiving a 50% stake. Perhaps one Henry would reconsider the idea of spending time there with his grandchildren. Although he had misgivings, the legal actions did not progress significantly. Lester was dismissed and forced to leave town by irate club members. The spouses of Julie Mitchell and Kim Ferguson received a small portion of the recording, where Lester admitted to having engaged with them. As a result, both spouses ended up divorcing. Mike Jensen, subsequent to 2 severe attacks following his departure from the gym where he frequently exercised, he elected to relocate despite inquiries. No suspects were identified in connection with the assaults. Henry and Liz sold their house and now reside in separate condominiums on opposite sides of the town. While Henry has initiated a new relationship, he remains wary due to his past encounters. In contrast, Liz, who gained a reputation for following their divorce, Tracy and Hank have chosen to avoid socializing for the time being. They maintain contact with their parents, although their relationship with their mother remains strained. When a tornado siren is activated, Henry displays a sorrowful smile and a shrug, while Liz becomes visibly distressed. The metaphorical storm within their lives was only revealed when a literal tornado struck. The following narrative describes this event. Sharon was displeased, and in fact, she was enraged. She was enraged with me and with her husband, Frank Miller. How did I discern her displeasure? It was straightforward. While driving us home from a gathering thrown by acquaintances of hers and in Hank Vander Link, she sat gripped in her seat as remote from me as possible, sporting a frown that could curdle milk. Why was she so unhappy with me? Well, I believe she had every right to be unhappy with me. Given that I was single, I effectively ruined her entire evening. I must feel guilty for embarrassing my wife, the mother of my 3 children. I am to blame for the unfortunate turn of events. How did I manage to disgrace her and ruin the night? I grabbed the wrong key. There is a unique aspect to the parties hosted by the Wonderings. It is a twist that my wife, in a sudden change of heart, decided to accept. Unfortunately for her, I had no interest in it. We had never attended one of their events before, but my wife, who had been married to me for a decade, neglected to notify me that the evening's affair would differ from the regular party scene. She had also neglected to notify me previously that at the evening's proceedings involved the spouses placing their house keys in a bowl. The men were then to select a key blindly and proceed to the corresponding wife's bedroom for a night of sexual intercourse. As the celebration drew to a close, I immediately comprehended the nature of the occasion. The nature of the occasion nearly caused me to lose my composure. I have never been so enraged at Sharon. I grasped her hand and pulled her into the kitchen. Did you have prior information of how this party would conclude? I demanded that she meet my gaze with a smirk. Yes, and you did not see fit to tell me of this vital data beforehand. And no. I was aware that you would not consent if given the option, and I concur. I am not amenable to this proposal, and I retain the prerogative to decline. Let us take our leave of this place. It would be discourteous to linger any longer. Furthermore, the undertaking is but a single night, and it might invigorate our lives. I am not inclined to embrace this type of excitement within the context of our marriage. Let's depart and leave. We genuinely require a modicum of excitement. Frank, I merely seek a modicum of excitement for one night. I desire to feel desired, not merely as a wife and mother. It is merely one night, and it will not recur. Furthermore, I have already misplaced our house key. The bowl indicated that they were committed. She reasoned that it wasn't too late. I retorted, look at me. I then proceeded to drag her back to the living room, where everyone was gathered around a bowl of keys, ready to select their partner for the night. Sharon resisted, attempting to free herself from my grasp. I then approached. I informed the group that I had not been informed of the particulars of the evening's events and that I would not be participating in the redistribution of my wife. Upon closer examination of the bowl, I located the key to our house, which was distinguishable by its red plastic covering. I proceeded to extract the key and address the assembled guests, stating that I had not been made aware of the regulations governing the party. Prior to this, I had not condoned infidelity, and I considered my marriage vows to be sacrosanct. However, there were indications of discontent and a few disgruntled expressions. I remained unwavering in my resolve, turning to my wife, who was visibly enraged. I presented her with an ultimatum. Sharon, you have a choice to make, but you must decide now. Come with me and forget this absurdity, or stay. And never return home. All eyes were on my wife. Her face had taken on a shame-faced expression. She appeared defiant. I apologized for my husband's actions. She addressed the group. I would like to stay, she said, but given the circumstances, it would be best if I leave reluctantly and angrily. She followed me to the car. As we departed, she lashed out, calling me both annoying and selfish. She demanded to know why I had embarrassed her in front of everyone. She vowed that we would never be invited back. I countered that she had also embarrassed me by not telling me about her plan to sleep with another man that night. I suggested that she could have picked one of the other wives and that we could both. I suggest that we enjoy ourselves. I do not desire another woman. I reserve this sexual activity entirely for my wife. I am rather upset to realize after a decade of marriage that you wish to share your bed with another man. It would only happen once. We have spent countless evenings together and will continue to do so. Do so. You're only proposing one night with someone else, which is not a modest request, especially given that I have been a faithful husband for the past 10 years. In actuality, this is a serious request. I am incredulous, but it is a significant matter for you, isn't it? Yes, Frank. It is. This has been a topic of discussion for several weeks. I have been seeking to expand my role beyond that of a wife and mother to include that of a woman seeking adventure, feeling valued, and enjoying a few hours of closeness with another man. This is therefore the only opportunity you will have to bond with someone other than your husband. I acknowledge that I may have been somewhat abrupt in my response. I found myself in the middle of the street and began to accelerate in the direction of the Vander Links residence. Sharon vocalized her surprise as I inquired about her thoughts. Frank, if engaging in sexual intercourse with another man for a single night is of such paramount importance to you, then I encourage you to proceed. I then came to a complete stop in front of their house, noting that all of the other automobiles had also come to a halt. The vehicle remained stationary. It would seem that there was still sufficient time for you to participate, so I encourage you to do so. Have a pleasant evening. Find a partner who can fulfill you in ways that I am unable to. Frank, this is merely an adventure. It is something distinct. Your performance is consistently excellent, and you are adept at delighting me. However, I cannot participate alone. We both need to engage in this activity. Each of us must spend the night with a new partner. I have already informed you that I do not wish to be involved in this situation. Sharon, I have never been disloyal to you. I refuse to engage in sexual intercourse with another woman until our marriage is terminated. What does this entail? It entails precisely that. What I said, Sharon, it's decision time. If you're going to do this, join your unfaithful colleagues. I am confident they will welcome a beautiful woman into their group, even if she is not accompanied by her spouse. Sharon grabbed for the doorknob, then paused. I could see her thinking, can you pick me up in the morning? Frank, you are aware that I will contact you to inform you of my whereabouts should I choose to engage in such an activity. There is no possibility of such an occurrence, but I am confident that your new romantic interest will be pleased to accompany you to your destination following our overnight encounter. Frank, that prospect is unappealing. He will not be my romantic partner, he will simply be someone new. It's only a one-night experience. I love you, Frank. You are the only man I have ever loved or will love. Do you truly believe that you cannot feign affection and then proceed with this plan? Let me clarify. You merely seek a novel sensual encounter, which could result in pregnancy by another man. Such a proposition is unseemly, Frank. I am on birth control, so that is not a concern, he will not impregnate me. However, it was only one night with someone new. It will be an exciting experience. Have you ever considered what it would be like to engage in sexual activity with someone who is newly in love? Everything is new and different, including the experience and sensations. It would be prudent to simply wait and see. There is a possibility that our closeness will be stronger than ever, so it would be advisable to enjoy your time with the new person and the new feelings. Sharon, it would be beneficial to ensure that you are fully aware of the implications of this decision. It is merely a single night. Frank, it is important to recognize that this is not a significant issue. Even a single moment would be excessive. We have a promising future together. However, should you proceed with this decision, it would have a detrimental impact on our future. I am imploring you, Sharon, to reconsider. Frank, you are overreacting, and I am standing firm in my decision. You will not mar my evening, I am determined to explore a new experience, and you cannot dissuade me. I am going through with it, and you will have to accept it. Do you understand that by tomorrow morning, I will be fully committed? I will pursue you once more, and I will make you forget all about it tomorrow morning. You will be nothing to me by then. I will never want you again after you gave another man what I always considered mine. Your actions are irrational. I belong to you, and you will want me too. I will make sure of that. Sharon, listen to me. If you leave this automobile, should you return to that house, it will irrevocably damage our relationship. Your single night will result in the dissolution of your marriage and the severing of your family ties. Frank, I am unable to accept this outcome. We are married, and that status will remain unchanged. We are destined to be together. I love you, and I am aware of your feelings for me. We will overcome this challenge together. I will make it up to you many times. You are breaking my heart, Sharon. Do not act like a youngster. Consider taking me on an expedition. What excites you is the conclusion of our relationship. You are not making sense, Frank. I will change your mind in the morning. You know how I'm going to do it. Do you honestly believe that I will not? I would not engage in sexual intercourse with you after you had spent the night with someone else. You would engage in sexual intercourse with me and more. That is something I will ensure God I never do. I was astounded by your foolishness. She opened the car door and started to leave to see you in the morning. Frank, I shook my head sadly and said no. Sharon, I will not see you. As soon as she closed the door, I accelerated, causing the tires to screech. This time, the sound was audible for half a block. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of her in the rearview mirror. She was standing on the side of the road, mouth wide open and unmoving. As she turned the corner, she vanished from my view. I fervently hoped she would promptly contact me, admit her misstep, and request my return. However, she did not. I felt devastated and overwhelmed, tears streaming down my cheeks, obscuring my vision. My wife had just chosen to spend the night with an unknown individual, after 10 years of marriage. Her actions were indicative of a marriage based on her behavior. It is possible that she believed I would dismiss her actions and return to our marriage. Perhaps she anticipated that I would be angry for a few days, after which she would entice me back into bed and our marriage would be restored. However, she was incorrect in her assumptions. My father once told me that if a woman is truly considering sleeping with another man, she has already psychologically done so. Another man has already been psychologically involved with her. For a married woman to entertain such ideas is to have already broken her vows. While fantasizing about an attractive person is normal, if she is planning how to make it happen, she has already gone too far. As unpleasant as the revelation is, it has broken our marriage. It is time to move forward. The most unfortunate aspect of this situation is the impact on our 3 children, Jocelyn, 8, Rebecca, Anne, 8, and Frank Jr., 4. It is challenging to contemplate the daily absence of my children, yet I am compelled to address Sharon's actions. The children were visiting my mother for the weekend, allowing me the opportunity to plan my subsequent actions. I drove aimlessly for approximately 30 minutes, hoping that Sharon would call for a ride. However, it became evident that she had made her decision. I had decided on my initial idea and went home when I pulled into the driveway. I was contacted by telephone, and I hoped it was Sharon, urging me to pick her up. However, the caller ID revealed that it was not her. It was not Sharon. Nevertheless, I accepted the call in the background, as the sounds of music and laughter from the party continued to reverberate. A male voice spoke, identifying himself as Rick Wilson from the party. He informed me that I had provided him with my phone number in the belief that he could persuade me to reconsider my decision. My wife was excited for tonight's festivities. She is essentially saying that you are fortunate to have the opportunity to interact with her. It is evident that every male in attendance desires to gain her attention and that she is determined to ensure that someone will have an exceptional experience. She is eager to facilitate this and to include you in the festivities. The atmosphere is becoming increasingly intense, as everyone awaits the announcement of who will be spending the night with whom. Do you still have the opportunity to return and obtain a key? There are some attractive women here who are eager to enjoy themselves tonight. I have no interest in engaging with you or anyone at your party, including my unfaithful wife. I hope you all experience a terrible fate. I ended the call and proceeded to return home in less than 20 minutes. I packed 2 suitcases with. I packed sufficient attire for a week or 2, along with my laptop and shaving equipment. After searching through a few drawers, I located our marriage certificate and divided it into 4 sections. I then obtained a hammer for my wedding ring. It required multiple strikes to achieve the desired level of flattening, but I eventually succeeded. I placed the certificate and ring on Sharon's pillow, closed the front door, and departed into the night. My initial intention was to locate a motel a few miles outside of town, but I first retraced my steps to the van, which had been parked outside of the house. Several vehicles had departed from the party, and a few others were parked on the street. Sharon was among them. I was not observed. I postulated that she had either proceeded with her new partner or formed an alliance with Mr. van der Laan. The motel I selected was situated in a proximate municipality. It did not appear to be particularly expansive, but it did have a concealed parking area in the rear. I placed a shield in my vehicle to protect it from prying eyes in case anyone came looking for it. After securing the vehicle, I proceeded to the nearby convenience store and procured a 6-pack of Newcastle. I then retired to the comfort of my residence to unwind with the evening's television programming. My initial 2 beverages effectively alleviated the accumulated stress, and as I opened the third, my mobile phone rang. I opted to allow the call to go to voicemail, recognizing the caller as Sharon. I was confident that she was not calling to request a meeting. I pick her up. Frank, you are behaving in a childish manner regarding this matter. Rick Wilson updated me on what you told him. How many times must I reiterate that it is only one night? I will permit one new individual to utilize coercion on me a couple of times, and it does not make me immoral. I swear that, even if it causes pain, I will make it up to you in ways you will appreciate. Upon my return tomorrow, I anticipate that you will not be concerned about this matter. However, as you have already removed our house key from the bowl provided to me, I have been given a new one. The individual who received it is named Glenn. He has assured me that he will not force me into any actions. He is married with children, just as we are. We are currently situated in our residence. I have consulted with his wife, and she has indicated that she will remain in a different part of the house, so that we will not disturb each other. If the situation becomes tense and we begin to make noise, you may be surprised at the volume of my voice when you touch me." She responded with a giggle. "I understand your distress, but I assure you that I will not allow him to do. I have advised Glenn that we adhere to our customary activities. He has met me on a few occasions, typically as a missionary or in a similar capacity for variety." Glenn concurred, particularly given this is my inaugural experience with another man. "He will take me home once we conclude our activities tomorrow. I will then shower. After cleansing myself, I shall return to you, fresh and ready for further intimacy. I shall leave no traces of my presence behind. Sweet dreams. I shall see you in the morning, prepared for further excitement. I love you, Frank." I felt as if my insides were being ripped apart. I had never imagined myself married to such a foolish and immoral woman. Sharon had always been a while she was somewhat flighty, this was part of her endearing personality. Her foolishness had been amplified, and it could cost her everything, her life, her husband, and perhaps even her children. She was unable to comprehend that I would not forgive her for allowing another man to have her and flaunting it in my face. It is likely that the entire party I was the subject of a jocular reference, which provoked a strong emotional response. I was enraged, wounded, and humiliated, yet my wife seemed unperturbed. I was aware that I should have ignored her message, yet I was unable to do so. I called her number, and she answered on the third ring. "Hello, honey Glenn," she said. "I have just gotten into bed and am getting cozy, so I can't talk for too long." "Shut up, Sharon," I replied. "This is probably the last you'll hear from me. You don't know what you've done. I have already taken the necessary steps to terminate the marriage, and I am confident that the consequences of your actions will be far more severe than you can imagine. I understand that you have slept with Glenn, but I want to make it clear that our marriage is over. I have never imagined that I would say this, but I hate you more than I have ever loved you. I am eager to be completely rid of you. I expect to hear from my lord next week." I then terminated the call after 30 seconds. Subsequently, my telephone rang. It was she. I permitted it to go to voicemail once more. "Frank," she sounded as though she was on the verge of tears. "Why are you doing this? How can you say such things to me? I would return home right now, but I informed Glenn that I would be with him tonight. I ask that you understand my need to do this. Glenn has acquired my key, and I have told him that he can sleep with me. He is currently desirous of doing so. I must go while we are talking. Glenn is ready. I love you, Frank. I will always love you. Please do not mention that when I do this with him, our marriage will. There is nothing I can do about it, my dear. He has already arrived. God, please, yes, please, try to comprehend." I heard her whisper to him, "Glenn, sleep with me. This is my night. See you in the morning, my dear." And once again, I was unable to resist. I called her back, and this time the phone rang several times before getting to voicemail, indicating that Glenn had previously received it. Therefore, I left a message after listening. In your final voicemail message, you indicated that you are currently in a romantic relationship with Glenn. You expressed your desire to spend the night with him and experience the new sensations he offers. I must say that I am deeply disappointed in your actions. It is admirable that you have maintained your pledge to Glenn, a man you have only recently met. However, you have not been as faithful to your husband, with whom you have been in a committed relationship for almost a decade. I am struggling to comprehend your decision-making process. I no longer recognize you. There is no possibility of reconciliation. You will not see me in the morning, and you may never see me again. Next week, I will serve you with divorce papers. I will file for infidelity. What else have you allowed now that you are with Glenn? You are officially a cheating adulterer. You can now sleep with any man you choose as often as you like. However, you have lost me for good. I will never forgive you. It is imperative that Sharon be held to her commitment. Despite my repeated attempts to contact her, she has not responded. I am aware that when a woman is coerced, she becomes aroused and enters a state of heightened emotional and physical intimacy with the men she is with. In this state, her focus narrows to the immediate experience, and the past and future become irrelevant. The last message I sent was of no consequence. The damage was already done, and our marriage was irreparably damaged. I could not forgive her for her mistreatment, humiliation, and destruction of our marriage. I completed the rest of the 6. I was reluctant to spend the night visualizing my wife naked in Glenn's bed. Up until that point, she had been exclusively mine. During the compulsion, Sharon was vocal, and I was convinced that she would implore Glenn to satisfy her in the same way that she had with me. I believe that she eventually did the same with Glenn. Eventually, the beard took its toll, and I fell asleep, tears still streaming down my cheeks. I awoke approximately 4 hours later, and reality set in. My once beautiful wife had deceived me. I wished to devise a strategy to safeguard my children, extricate myself from the marriage, and inflict as much distress as possible on others at our residence in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. This antebellum community on the Gulf Coast has a reputation for its attractive quality of life. Given that Mississippi views infidelity as grounds for divorce, I may avoid paying child support and potentially gain custody of my children. I needed a lawyer with the requisite qualifications and capabilities. I showered, changed my clothes, and called my mother at 7 p.m. To provide her with a summary of the situation, she was similarly astonished by Sharon's conduct with the children in her care over the weekend. She stated that she would not divulge any information to them. I informed her that I would inform them once I had formulated a strategy, despite my reservations. I acknowledged that Sharon would likely be granted custody, at least temporarily. I reluctantly came to the realization that I had previously regarded her as a devoted mother to our children and a reliable spouse. However, my perspective shifted following my conversation with my mother. I was en route to a local restaurant for breakfast when I received a call from Sharon. I opted to leave a voicemail, but she did not leave a message. She soon called back, but I did not answer. She proceeded to dial the number repeatedly until, on the 5th attempt, she left a message expressing her sadness. She implored him to answer the phone and speak with her. She demanded to know why he might not see her again and why there was so much debate about divorce papers. She stated that she would not allow him to leave her. She emphasized the importance of their 3 children and their need for both parents. She then asked why he had destroyed their marriage certificate. Furthermore, she discarded her wedding ring and destroyed the accompanying certificate. She had given him the ring on their wedding day, and he had promised to wear it forever. It represented their enduring affection for one another. She had expected him to be angry with her, but she had not anticipated that he would take such a drastic step. She told him that she loved him and that she had simply needed a special night with Glenn. That night had been special for her because he had made her feel young again. I have forgotten what it is like to laugh and scream at the same time. However, last night was just as great. You are my man, Frank, my only man. I know how to set things right and resolve your problems. Please come home, Frank. Allow me to show you how much I love you. Come home and bring me back to that point. She began to sob, her words becoming garbled and indistinct. It is challenging to comprehend Frank's rationale for failing to recognize the necessity of a single night with a new partner. I required a novel experience with a man who sought and craved me. It was gratifying to know that another man found me attractive and was eager to possess and own me. Frank is likely unaware of how empowering it is for a woman of my age to witness a man's ardent passion. She was aware that he desired her and that she was the reason for his actions. Frank, you were aware that it was about cohesion, there was nothing more. He simply had a connection with me. Please, Frank, let us converse. I love you and our children mean everything to me. Her voice wavered as she spoke. It was only coercion, Frank. God, you just used coercion on me a couple of times. We were merely using Frank, that is all it was, coercion. Her weeping continued until the message ended. I stood outside the diner, astonished. Had she held these thoughts throughout our marriage? After 30 years, it had all surfaced unexpectedly. Sharon remained a striking woman with shoulder-length dark brown hair, light blue eyes, and a beautiful body. While her chest was not particularly large, it was still quite attractive. Her hips had broadened slightly after having 3 children. Nevertheless, she continued to attract the attention of males wherever she went. This led to the question of what this thing about wanting to be desired by another man was all about. I continuously expressed my love and desire for her. I would often surprise her with flowers and take her out on weekly outings. He purchased her seductive necklaces and reminded her of her beauty and his affection for her every day until yesterday night. He assumed that their bedtime routine was gratifying, They made love at least 3 times per week with several climaxes. What might he have overlooked despite his lack of appetite? He entered the diner, found a vacant booth, and ordered scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee. Despite having consumed only a small quantity of lunch, I proceeded to consume at least 6 cups of coffee. I had never experienced such a profound sense of despair, emptiness, and defeat. I had previously heard that individuals often wish to die, and I now understand why the only thing preventing me from succumbing to despair was the thought of my children, who needed me to navigate the chaos that Sharon had unleashed and build a future for them. My knowledge of the situation strengthened my resolve. I would persevere. I only needed to make a plan. Throughout the day, Sharon contacted my phone constantly, but I always directed her calls to voicemail. She asked for understanding but never apologized for her conduct. There was no admission of error, she just insisted on having that one night to herself. My responsibility was evidently to understand and assist. The couple engaged in sexual intercourse on 3 occasions that night and again in the morning. This was the extent of their interaction. It was not difficult to comprehend that this was merely a one-night stand, an incident that could be readily forgiven and forgotten. The woman expressed concern that she had not disabled her mobile phone in time, and that I might have overheard her conversation with Glenn. She hoped that I had not heard too much. I needed to give she demonstrated an acute understanding of the emotional distress she was causing me. I was initially incredulous at the extent of her idiocy. However, there was a glimmer of hope. I had amassed sufficient audio evidence of her infidelity to pursue legal action. While I was uncertain as to the potential outcome, the material was undeniably compelling and left no room for doubt. Tomorrow, I would contact a lawyer to discuss the next steps. I would contact a reputable lawyer and procure all pertinent facts. I paid a visit to my children at my mother's residence. She informed me that Sharon had previously contacted her to inquire about the children's well-being and my whereabouts. My mother advised Sharon that I was distressed by her actions and did not wish to communicate with her. Sharon, according to my mother, became visibly distressed. I reassured her that no man would understand why a wife would display a night of intimacy with another man in front of her spouse. Sharon inquired about retrieving the children, but my mother advised her to keep them for a few more days until everything calmed down. The children greeted me cheerfully but inquired about their mother's whereabouts. I explained that Mom was busy with a particular project and that they would be staying with their grandmother for a little longer. We played together and shared. After dinner, I embraced and kissed my children goodbye before returning to my accommodation the following day. I anticipated a demanding schedule before we concluded the day. I made one final stop, or rather drove past my house. Tears welled up as soon as I saw it again. I grieved for something I could never restore. It seemed peculiar that there were no unfamiliar vehicles in the driveway, although there could have been a car in the garage. Sharon was most likely alone tonight, judging by the solitary glow from the kitchen downstairs. However, I was beset by persistent anxiety. I arose, still caring for her, regardless of her actions. The betrayal hurt terribly. I fought the impulse to stop and examine her, but eventually yielded to the urge. I parked a block away and approached the side of the house to peer through the kitchen window. She sat there with a discarded bottle of Grey Goose by her side, unkempt hair and smudged makeup. She placed her head on the table, dressed in a robe and facing me, eyes closed. It was obvious she had been weeping, surrounded by a pile of Kleenex. For a brief period, I felt a sense of sympathy, then the memories returned. I was overwhelmed by the realization of the gravity of her decisions and their consequences. I was compelled to suppress the urge to lash out and instead retreated to my vehicle, departing with a sense of satisfaction. Perhaps she was beginning to grasp the significance of her actions. If she sought solace, she might turn to her primary source of support, Glenn. On Monday, I had a demanding schedule at the diner. I consumed eggs, toast, and coffee until I finished my meal. I contacted my mother and spoke with all of my children, reassuring them of my love and support. I then contacted my office and informed my assistant that I would be unavailable for the next 2 days due to personal matters. I requested that she contact me if any important developments occurred. She inquired about my well-being, and I assured her that everything was fine. I committed to providing an explanation later. During my final year at OL-Miss, I shared an apartment with 2 close friends, Douglas, Perry, and Maxwell McCrae. Despite our limited interactions, our friendship remained strong. Douglas and Maxwell studied business. I was pursuing studies in computer science, while Doug and Max were engaged in studies in administration and law, respectively. I initiated contact with Doug, requesting his and Max's presence for a meeting at approximately 5 p.m. I informed them that I required their counsel on a matter of great importance. Doug agreed to facilitate Max's meeting with me at the Lava Bar, situated on the beach. I awaited their arrival, and at approximately 5 p.m., Max emerged, followed by Doug approximately 10 minutes later. After cordial greetings, we proceeded to a patio table and ordered beers. We then raised our glasses in a toast, inquiring of each other the nature of the matter that had brought us together. "Doug, your call seemed serious." He added that Sharon had been unfaithful and had not concealed it. I recounted the entire event, which had been distressing. Doug expressed sympathy. I was incredulous that she would do such a thing. Max concurred, stating that he did not believe she would act in such a way without feeling no guilt. I asked whether he thought I was overreacting. He replied that I was not. I then stated my intention to pursue divorce and retaliation against Glenn and the other partygoers. However, my primary objective was to pursue custody of my children. Frank warned Max that if Sharon is an unfit mother, bringing strange men home for TRRS while the children are around would be grounds for legal action. However, if she is a competent mother, she is likely to retain custody and he would have to pay child support. Max affirmed that he was fine with this arrangement, provided he had regular access to the children. Max and Doug discussed the possibility of Sharon being a stay-at-home parent. "I am operating under the assumption that you are the primary caregiver and that you earn a six-figure income. Could you please provide me with an overview of your financial situation? This should include information about your checking and savings accounts, any investments you have made, and your 401k and individual retirement account balances. I am looking for a total of approximately $700. The total value of the assets in question is estimated to be between $600,000 and $800,000. If the total value of the assets in question is between $000 and somewhat more, it is likely that the court will split them evenly, giving Sharon both the house and custody. However, if there is a strong possibility that you can prove that you despise her cheating, you may be able to avoid paying alimony. Do you know a great divorce lawyer? One of my colleagues at the firm is a leading family law practitioner in Mississippi is Maddie Simmons. Would you like me to organize a meeting? It would be beneficial to have this as soon as possible," Max said. In the interim, Doug explained, "I will look at ways to protect some of your valuables. Send me all of your financial information, and I will handle it after." Another toast was made, and a few more drinks were consumed before the group said their goodbyes. A sense of relief was suddenly experienced, a feeling that had not been present since the tragedy began. As the group drove back to their respective motels, their minds raced with the duties that lay ahead. Sharon called the author's cell phone after a moment of reluctance. It was then realized that the author would have to approach her. Subsequently, I pulled over and responded, "What do you want, Sharon?" I opted for directness and brevity, asking, "Frank, what is your opinion?" I stated my desire for my spouse to return home, where he rightfully belongs. I could discern tears in her voice. "Unfortunately, your interactions with Glenn, as you described them, make it challenging. For me to return home," her tears filled the silence. "It is imperative that you reconsider your position. I spent only one night away from you after 10 years, which is not grounds for divorce. You must rethink your stance on this matter. Infidelity is undoubtedly grounds for divorce in Mississippi. Why do you persist in referring to it as cheating? It was only one night. A night with someone new, even if it is just a fling, represents a significant breach of trust for a married woman. Regardless of whether the encounter lasts for one night or 1 second, it constitutes cheating. I have previously stated that if you engage in sexual relations with another man under coercion, it will result in the dissolution of our relationship. I am not exaggerating when I say that this is a serious matter. I implore you, Frank, to reconsider your actions." "Sharon, you pleaded that you caused this to yourself, Sharon. What has transpired to cause such a drastic shift in your behavior? Are you taking hallucinogenic medications? Have you experienced a mental breakdown? Or, perhaps, are you simply lacking in judgment?" I inquired, and it seems that you were so consumed with the idea of coercing another man that you failed to consider the consequences. Did you care about our children or my opinion? Did you care about what I wanted? You were so consumed with the idea of coercing another man that you did it, and now you are facing the consequences. I continued, we were happy. We had a nice house and 3 great kids. Our life was amazing. Then you ruined it by sleeping with someone you don't know and rubbing. I expressed my regret at having brought this situation into our lives. We had always been happy, Frank, and we are pleased today. I was only thinking about what it would be like to be with another man for one night in our long life together. I was simply trying to experience something new without causing any harm. That is all. Sharon explained that there were no injuries, but you seem to have difficulty grasping this concept. The damage you have caused has effectively destroyed our family unit as a result of your selfish actions. You have shattered our lives into a multitude of fragments, and there is no possibility of reuniting them. I initially stated that Sharon, you have caused irreparable harm to me, despite your assertion that you were indifferent to the consequences of your actions. I inquired as to whether she recalled my identity as her husband, the man who had loved her unquestionably from the moment we met. Despite my efforts to provide for her and our children in accordance with their aspirations, she had rejected me and sought solace in the arms of a complete stranger. You relinquished portions of your body that you had previously pledged would only belong to me. This promise was made before God, our families, and our friends. Last night, you made it clear that you intended to proceed with this arrangement, regardless of my objections. You essentially instructed me to leave. You are at liberty to act as you see fit, and I will not interfere. I did not anticipate that events would unfold in this manner, Frank. I am unsure why, but I did not anticipate causing you distress. My actions were driven by a desire to explore a new experience. I love you, but I recognize that my actions were not motivated by you. They were driven by my own needs, which ultimately led us to this point. You have chosen to remove yourself from the situation. You have effectively removed me from the equation. You and Glenn's adulterous encounter last night was a private matter between the two of you. You did not consider the impact on me or our children. I deserve a special night just for myself. You have effectively achieved your goal of ending our marriage and, most likely, damaging your reputation with your family and friends. It is possible that I may eventually forgive you, but I will never forget what you have done. I will ensure that everyone is aware of your actions, just as you branded me a spoiled brat for expressing my outrage about your affair. Let us see how you respond to this, knowing that everyone will hear you admit to what you did with Glenn. One might inquire as to the number of times Frank has been petitioned. It is likely that my parents would be devastated if they were to discover the truth. Sharon, it would have been prudent to consider the potential consequences of your actions before embarking on your course of action. Now, you find yourself in a situation where you must endure the consequences of your actions. It seems that you believe that your actions are comparable to receiving a traffic citation or failing to return a library book. However, in this case, you have exchanged a stable 10. A year of marriage with a man who adored you, followed by late-night rendezvous with a stranger who just cared about fast fulfillment. Do you feel okay, Sharon? Glenn slept with you 4 times, which resulted in the loss of your family. I did not have to lose anything, Frank. You should have loved me enough to support me and let me do it. There is not a single rational man on this earth who would back his wife having an affair just because she wanted to. To explore new possibilities, one must consider the potential consequences. It is evident that you were aware of the implications of your actions. What were your motives, Sharon? I did not anticipate your reaction. Frank, what is the significance of allowing another individual to engage in intimate relations with me on numerous occasions? Sharon questioned my actions with Glenn last night do not indicate a reduction in my affection for you. I am aware of couples engaging in sexual intercourse at golf courses, and this attracted me. Is it not possible for a husband or wife to engage in sexual intercourse with a stranger on one occasion? This could be a positive experience for all parties involved, allowing for the exploration of new sensations. I decided to proceed with this course of action. I desired to experience physical intimacy with another man. This did not signify a diminution of my love for you. Frank. Sharon initiated this encounter, which I permitted solely once. Thereafter, I would devote myself entirely to you once more. However, your actions indicated a lack of respect for me. I implored you to refrain from repeating this action, yet you merely smiled and stated, "See you in the morning." Frank, you have eroded the intimacy we have shared for over a decade. The vows we exchanged held significant meaning for me, yet you have rendered them meaningless. Our physical union has resulted in the birth of 3 wonderful children. We were a family, and now you have freely surrendered that part of yourself that generated our children to another man. You justify this decision by claiming that it was merely a one-night stand. However, I believe that it was much more than that. I maintain that it was a significant act that has irreparably damaged our family. In effect, you have repudiated the fundamental tenets of our relationship, our family, our sacred vow of love and obedience, and any respect you have hitherto demonstrated for me. You have chosen to be with another man, and you have done so. I acknowledge that you have made your own decision, but I am left with the impression that you have discarded everything you previously held dear and respected. I still consider myself to be part of you. I love you, but I am unable to resume my role in your life. I acknowledged, I am enraged by your obstinacy. I am unable to comprehend why you are so resistant to accepting that this was a necessary and beneficial experience for me. I am forever yours, and everything has changed. Sharon, you are no longer solely mine. I am at a loss as to why you are unable to comprehend the situation. I implored you not to take this action. I am unable to forgive and move on from the deception you have perpetrated against me. This pain will last a lifetime. I have retained legal counsel and will be filing for divorce on the grounds of infidelity. I will be naming your lover, Glenn, and any other individuals from your circle who may be involved as parties to the proceedings. Consider the potential responses of those affected by your actions. It is possible that your infidelity may have contributed to the dissolution of their social circle and perhaps even tarnished their reputation. It would be prudent to avoid such consequences by ceasing your illicit activities. Upon meeting with my attorney, Simmons, I recognized her as the optimal legal counsel for my case. She efficiently identified the key issues and promptly addressed them. She inquired about my intentions regarding the dissolution of our marriage and the desired outcome. I informed her that I intended to divide our assets and offered our residence in exchange for a lesser sum of money. I was aware that I might not secure full custody of our children, but I sought to maintain significant visitation rights. Visitation without child support. I presented all the audio evidence I had of Sharon's adultery, in which she repeatedly confessed to sleeping with Glenn. Miss Simmons expressed dismay at the recklessness of my wife, who had disclosed her affair in a way that could be used against her. In court, it is likely that a speech recognition expert would be required to certify that the voice in question belongs to your wife. However, unless we encounter an unusually biased judge, the recordings should be sufficient to prove your case. The entire hour was spent discussing your intentions regarding Glenn and the other attendees at the event. While she doubted that we could demand monetary compensation from them, she suggested that we could find ways to expose their behavior and disgrace them enough to inflict significant consequences. I agreed that would be satisfactory for me after making a deposit. I requested that Sharon be served soon. She assured me it wouldn't take long and promised to notify me beforehand on Tuesday afternoon. I picked up my children from my mother and took them to Sharon's residence. When she greeted us at the door, she hugged and kissed all 3 of them heartily before reaching out to me. However, I stepped aside, leading her to believe that I was not interested in continuing the interaction. She began to weep and implore me to stay. I informed her that I was unable to do so, but I believed it would be preferable for the children to return home to her. I arranged to collect them on Friday for the weekend. Sharon appeared to be struggling, and I expressed my sympathy for her, but she had brought this situation upon herself. Her distress was no more severe than my own, given her actions on Wednesday. I returned to work, recognizing that I could not neglect my responsibilities. I needed my job now more than ever, not only for financial assistance but also as a distraction. I believe that if I continued to dwell in the misery and self-pity of Sharon's betrayal, I would eventually lose my sanity, which I could not afford for the sake of my children. As a result of Sharon's deceit, I was concerned that I might eventually lose my sanity, which I felt was not a viable option given the importance of maintaining my mental stability for the sake of my children. On Thursday, I met with Doug and Max again, this time for dinner at the Oyster House. During the meal, I indulged in hand-shucked oysters and a dirty martini. I also took the opportunity to provide them with an update on my children and the divorce proceedings. I examined potential methods for concealing a portion of my assets. I granted him permission to proceed, though the amount involved would be insignificant. However, it would prove advantageous in the long run. We devised a relatively straightforward plan to disrupt the wife-swapping group without risking claims of slander. Max had a colleague who worked as a reporter for the Boston Herald. He was convinced that if he were provided with the location of Vander Link's residence and the approximate time of the wife-swapping gathering, he could ascertain the identities of certain participants he wished to expose in an editorial. He sought to reveal the extent of the boy-wife exchange, which he perceived to be greater than was generally believed. To this end, he planned to distribute images of couples arriving and departing, thereby suggesting involvement. The involvement of specific firms without mentioning names would undoubtedly prompt the religious majority to voice complaints, creating difficulties for the entire group. I provided Max with the limited information I had, and he stated he would begin with that, using positive words. We shook hands and parted ways until our next encounter. The children had a wonderful time. We went shopping for new clothes, visited the Grand 18 movie theater in Dior, and spent the day at the beach swimming and playing frisbee. My children were my primary focus, and I vowed never to abandon them on Monday morning. Max contacted me. He is a friend of his from the media who has embraced the story idea. I was in the process of acquiring images of couples entering Vander Links and emerging with new partners, although the faces would be blurred. It is unlikely that people would be naive, and in a city of this size, it would not take long for the moral majority to piece everything together. If all proceeded well, it may become a top-page story later this week. I will await developments with interest. Sharon persistently contacted me, imploring me to return home and promising to do whatever was necessary to make me forget about her actions. However, she never apologized or acknowledged her mistake on Wednesday. My lawyer informed me that Sharon would be served with divorce papers at our home on Friday morning, shortly after Doug disclosed that he had found that this meant that approximately one-third of my assets were concealed by placing them in the names of my children. Subsequently, Max contacted me to inform me that an acquaintance of his from the media had discovered that the gathering, which involved the exchange of partners, was scheduled to take place again on Friday night at Vander Links. He intended to monitor the site and photograph all individuals entering and exiting. Additionally, he sought to I was contacted by a journalist who wished to conduct an interview about the party, which was scheduled to take place the following week. I experienced a sense of relief. When Friday arrived, I awaited a call from Sharon. As anticipated, my lawyer contacted me at approximately 2:30 to confirm that she had been served with the divorce papers. Sharon expressed her displeasure with the tone of the call. "Sharon, how are you? What did you do?" "Frank," she demanded. "I filed for divorce." "Sharon, as I said I would," I replied calmly. "I told you there will be no divorce. You have reported me for treason. Spending one night with another man isn't cheating. Other than your spouse, infidelity in Mississippi is a criminal offense," I stated firmly, her voice cracking as she cried. "Why are you so upset with me, Frank? I love you, Glenn. I had an affair, that's all. My mistake, Sharon. How could I have misunderstood that having sexual relations with someone other than your spouse wasn't cheating? It's over, Sharon. I warned you. Once more, I implored you to reconsider, yet you proceeded nonetheless, and now you must face the consequences. I empathize with your ongoing struggles, but they are far from over." I ended the call, concluding that my primary dilemma remained my enduring love for Sharon. This sentiment is likely to persist, yet I recognize that trust has been irreparably damaged. My marriage was irreparably damaged, rendering it impossible for me to continue in a relationship with a person who had been unfaithful. Despite my awareness that I should avoid the Friday night gatherings at Vander Links, I found myself driven by temptation to drive by the venue to catch a glimpse of what was happening. I was also curious to see if Sharon's vehicle was present, anticipating that she would likely skip the event to avoid my her vehicle was not present, yet she might have arrived with another individual. The club typically permitted only couples, but they had made an exception for her on a previous occasion. It was unclear whether they would do so again. Across the street, a van was parked, likely housing the reporter. I silently wished him success in disclosing their secrets. Subsequently, Max's colleague, a journalist, telephoned me to request specific information, which I was happy to provide. He informed me that he had collected over 100 images and recognized more than a dozen couples, all of whom were respected members of the community. Interestingly, it appeared that the same couples were not constantly entering and exiting the residence. 2 hours later, Max provided him with a photograph. He requested my account of the key party's inner workings, specifically regarding how keys were deposited into a large bowl. Although I had not directly experienced the subsequent key selection, I was able to gather a clear understanding of the process from Sharon's narrative and by eavesdropping on other attendees. The couples discussed previous encounters before concluding that he should indirectly reference his first-hand experience of a marriage that had been destroyed by such parties, resulting in the suffering of children due to divorce. I encouraged him to continue until the names were called. The article was published in the Sunday edition of the newspaper and caused considerable outrage. The article was published on the front page, accompanied by a large photograph of couples entering and exiting. Despite efforts to conceal identities, the article included a dozen additional images across 4 pages. Many individuals were immediately recognizable based on their vehicles and attire. By Monday, the article had reached a vast audience, with discussions about it spreading throughout the city. The atmosphere was filled with discussions about the exposé and the scandalous parties. Numerous priests voiced their grievances during radio and TV interviews, denouncing the moral degradation among their Christian community. Meanwhile, civic authorities criticized the city's ruined reputation. Litigation and counterclaims ensued, but proved ineffective. Repercussions included the loss of business for several well-known companies. As a result of the scandal, numerous companies lost clientele and several couples ended up in divorce court. For me, it was a peculiar form of retribution for the sorrow I experienced following the loss of my wife and family. Despite the humiliation I endured, I remained indifferent. Revenge was the sole objective. Sharon persistently attempted to reconcile for months, but her efforts were in vain. Despite my efforts, the divorce was finalized, providing me with joint custody of our children. During my custody months, she had them on weekends and vice versa. While this was not ideal, we managed to cope since Sharon did not contest any aspect of the divorce. I saved her from the embarrassment of revealing the audio confession of her infidelity with her or friends. As for the couples participating in the key events, some divorced and emigrated, while others simply vanished. Sharon began dating, although she seemed unaware of why her activities were objectionable to me. However, it was her prerogative. I extended best wishes to her future husband. I dated several pleasant ladies but never found one I was ready to commit to. To enter into a lifelong commitment, some individuals expressed interest in cohabitation, yet I remained reluctant to relinquish my independence. I extend my gratitude to those who took the time to listen to today's narrative. If you found this account engaging, I request that you express your approval by clicking the like button and subscribe to future updates. If you have a personal experience to share regarding a similar situation, I encourage you to contact me.